right, let's talk about page 9. Page 9 looks almost exactly like page 8, and it's going to work the same way. So, number 1. 50% of 30. Now, again, I know that you can do it in your head. Half of 30 is 15. 50% is half. We know that. But again, you have to work through the steps anyway. So, 50% of 30. Step 1. 50% as a decimal. Divide by 100. 0 and 5/10 because I don't need to include the extra 0. Step 2. 30 times 0 and 5/10. 5 times 0 is 0. 5 times 3 is 15. I have nowhere to carry that 1, so it stays in my answer. 0 times 0 is 0. 0 times 0 is still 0. 0, 5, 1, 1 decimal spot, 1 decimal spot. There's 15. So therefore, 50% of 30 equals 15. I don't have to include the 0 and the decimal in my answer because, of course, it does not affect the value of the number. 15 and 15.0 are the same. All right, so that's how you do all the way from number 1 to number 12. They're all the same. Do exactly this. Let's talk about number 13. Number 13 has a decimal in the percent already. It does not impact the steps that you need to do. They stay the same. But let's do an example of number 13 just so that everybody understands the steps stay exactly the same. It's just that the numbers change. So, number 13, I have 2.5% of 120. So, step 1, 2.5% as a decimal. So I still need to divide by 100, but this time I already have a decimal, so I'm going to move it 1, 2 spots over. I'm not going to start at the back of my number. I already have a decimal. So I'm still moving it 2 spots. That doesn't change. And that empty spot still gets a 0. So I end up with 2 and 25 thousandths. So 2.5% as a decimal is 0.025. Now I have to do step 2. Step 2 is where I take my, and I times it. Remember, it's always easier to put the number with the least amount of digits on the bottom to make it a smaller multiplication question for you. So 0 times 5 is 0. 0 times 2 is 0, and 0 times 0 is 0. 0 times 0 is still 0. Put your X, and now your answers are going to start under the 2, and that's the number you're going to use to then times up. 2 times 5 is 10, carry your 1. 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5. 2 times 0 is 0, and 2 times 0 is still 0. Now you put your 2 x's, and your answers are going to start under the 1, so the 1 is the word you're going to use now. 1 times 5 is 5, and 1 times 2 is 2, and 1 times 0 is 0. Okay, and so, oh, and also another 0. And now, you times them all up. You add them all up. So 0 plus nothing is 0. 0 plus 0 plus nothing is still 0. 5 plus 5 plus 0 is 10. Carry your 1. 2 plus 1 plus nothing is 3. 0, 0. Now, how many decimal spots do I have? In this case, I have 3. 1, 2, 3 decimal spots. So 1, 2, 3 decimal spots in my answer. What is my answer? It's 3. The zeros here, I don't need them. They do not impact the value of my 3. The zeros here, I don't need them. They, again, do not impact the value of my 3. So 3 is my answer. Therefore, 2.5% of 120 is 3. Again, you don't need to put 003, and you don't need to put 3.000. 3 can just stay as a 3. Those zeros do not affect its value. So that's how you do number 13 all the way to number 18. Each one of those percentages already has a decimal in it. So when you're dividing by 100, use the decimal that you're already given and move that decimal 2 spots over. All right, number 19 all the way to number 24 works exactly the same way. Sometimes you're dealing with money, but they don't have any cents, so you don't need to worry about that. So let's move right over to number 25. Number 25, all the way to number 28, is again one of those ones where you need to compare. You need to figure out the percent on one side and on the other and figure out which one's bigger, smaller, or the same. So let's do number 25. So for number 25, the first one I'm given is 6% of 120. So step 1, 6% as a decimal. Move that decimal 2 spots over, 0 and 600. Step 2, 120 times 0 and 600. Step 1 and step 2 are always the same. So 6 times 0 is 0, 6 times 2 is 12, carry your 1. 6 times 1 is 6, plus the one that I carried is 7. And then you put your X and your zeros, because the next 2 in line are zeros. So you know that the answers are going to be 0. And here we've got 0, 2, 7, 0, 0. And then your decimal, I have 2 decimal spots, so I'm going to have 2 decimal spots. So my answer here is 7 and 2/10. I don't really need to include the zeros in front of the 7, and I don't really need to include the 0 at the back of the 2. Now the other side is 60% of 12. So, step 1, 60% is, as a decimal, 0.6, right? You divide by 100, you move that decimal spot 2 over, and now you've got 0.6. I don't need to include the 0. Step 2, my 0.6 times 12. 2 times 6 is 12. Carry your 1. 2 times 0 is 0, plus the one that you carried. 1 times 6 is 6. 1 times 0 is 0. Add them up. Decimal spots. And lo and behold, they are the same. 7 and 2/10. 7 and 2/10. So both sides are equal. So you would replace the blank, the little diamond there, with the equal sign. All right, so if you have questions about any of this on page 9, do get in touch and I will help walk you through any one of these questions.